We have to keep our wits about us as performers.
Mm-hmm.
We are, in a sense, actors, and we have to bring this music, this drama to life for the listener.
G'day, and welcome to COVID Classical, a playlist for our troubled times. My name is Dane Lam, and I'm principal conductor of the Xi'an Symphony Orchestra in China. And before we were all confined to our homes by this pandemic, I conducted at orchestras and at opera houses all over the world. Each week, I will curate a playlist that explores the emotions we're feeling in this COVID isolation through some of the most invigorating, inspiring classical music ever written. This week, we're going to look into an all too common emotion that has been intensified by long periods in lockdown: anger. Anger has probably manifested itself in your own lockdown. Maybe it's the tension that inevitably arises by extended periods in close quarters with our nearest and dearest. The missteps of our supposed leaders. The anger at not being able to do what we feel we should be doing. Or indeed, the dastardly injustices that have been inflicted upon the most vulnerable in society under the cover of pandemic darkness. But is anger only a negative emotion? Sure, it raises our blood pressure, increases the release of cortisol, the stress hormone, and according to medical professionals, it can reduce our lifespan. We can act rashly when we're angry, and I'm sure we all wish we could take back angry jibes. Yet, at its best, righteous anger can lead us to call out grievous injustices taking place right under our noses. We need only to look at the recent events growing out of Minnesota that soon spread around America and to the rest of the world to see how anger can lead to the action in face of grave human rights violations. Anger can inject a sense of purpose and optimism, and it can be cathartic, expiating our negative emotions and paradoxically leading to an inner calm. And so it is in music. It can be a challenge to put a finger on how composers convey anger, but some musical elements immediately spring to mind. Loud and fast music, of course, seems very angry. Stabby, discordant explosions conjure up pictures of bulging veins and incandescent rage. There are certain combinations of notes and melodic contours, sharp, jagged, angular, that can sow the same seeds of discord. Angry music tends towards being very succinct. Think of when we're angry ourselves. There's a violent outburst and then the aftermath, whether it's shame, calm, or resolution. Musicians, indeed all performing artists, also depend on a certain degree of temperament or ego to connect with the audience from the stage. But those same egos can also lead to almighty outbursts when they clash in rehearsal. Just think of the great Italian maestro Arturo Toscanini, revered for his unrivaled passion for perfection and for fidelity to the composer's intentions. He would go to any lengths to achieve it from his long-suffering musicians.
Sì, canta, canta, corpo, cantate! Cattivi suonatori, per Dio santo! Non capite un cavolo! Vergogna!
Yet, not all musicians resort to anger like Toscanini. In fact, our guest this week has one of the most collegial and charming and calming presences of any colleagues I've ever worked with. The Irish pianist Barry Douglas made waves around the classical music world when he won the Tchaikovsky Competition in 1986 at the height of the Cold War. He was the first non-Russian pianist to win this fabled prize since Van Cliburn some 30 years earlier. Now, Barry plays with an authenticity and infectious love and respect for all the music he plays. He performs all around the world with the greatest orchestras and conductors, and he also conducts himself. As part of the Irish peace process, Barry founded his orchestra, Camerata Ireland, in 1999, and they are still in demand all over the world. It was my great pleasure to collaborate with him last year in Xi'an, where we performed Rachmaninoff's monumental Third Piano Concerto, and I'm pleased to say, not an angry word was exchanged. Still, I'm happy to discuss the concept of anger in music with one of the great musical minds of our time.
Well, hello, Barry. Great to have you here on the show. Thanks for agreeing to come on.
It's a pleasure, Dane. Great to be on it.
It's great to see you again. And, you know, in this really strange time that we've all been having in lockdown, what have you been doing to keep yourself occupied, to keep your mind on the music or even away from the music?
Well, I mean, I did take a little break from practicing the piano for a week or so, and then decided that, well, I started to do a lot of different videos for different presenters, you know, either concerts that were cancelled of mine or something that's coming up in the near future. And so I did a lot of that. And then we did a concert for carers for the NHS. Arranging music, I'm trying to grasp the software, the Sibelius software, so that I can actually put it on paper. This is a project I've been doing for a long time, arranging field nocturnes for piano and orchestra, piano and chamber orchestra, and also Irish kind of tunes and airs and jigs and putting them down on paper. So I'm kind of doing that too.
The theme this week, against all that calmness, is anger, actually. Anger on this week of COVID Classical. So, I mean, what does anger in music mean to you? Are there certain musical elements, rhythm, tonality, whatever, that really would convey anger, in your opinion, in music?
Well, the classic thing is the tritone. This, for people who are not quite sure what that is, it's an interval, it's a minor fifth interval. And they would say in the 19th century that this was the chord or the music of the devil.
Yeah.
And so things with that kind of basis of tonality can suggest anger. Thinking of, well, you know, a lot of Liszt, the Dante Sonata, which is all about hell. Then, for instance, the last Beethoven Piano Sonata in C minor, it doesn't start with a tritone, but it's all very diminished, crunchy chords, and very rarely kind of resolves. There's no resolution, no calmness comes, except in the second movement. But in the first movement is totally at C. So those I mean, I think that the interval of the tritone, I think, is the main one for me.
And what about the length of, you know, of the Dante Sonata or the Beethoven, for example? The bits that are actually angry, like really angry and turbulent and furious and raging, are they very long?
Beethoven's quite clever. He does give us a little bit of respite from time to time.
Yeah,
but
it's
that first
interesting, isn't it?
By and large, very, the first movement by and large is very, how would you say, just incredibly, the energy is so amazing, but it's a kind of a relentless, impulsive, compulsive energy, which really grabs at you.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, the emotion of anger, real rage or real fury itself it burns itself out very quickly. It's hard to sustain being angry, I suppose. And I think Beethoven probably knew it in his final sonata. He just couldn't sustain it without the respite.
Yeah, and it's funny that just the sonata just before the final one, in A flat, in the last movement, which has two rather big grand fugues, when he recalls the slow movement in the middle of these two fugues, at the end, he has a series of 8 or 9 or 10 G major chords, which get steadily louder and louder and louder. And I have a feeling that he's trying to hear the chord himself. He's angry because it's very thick left hand, and then it just kind of dissipates into the fugue again, which is all lightness and air.
Because at that time in his life, he basically couldn't hear, could he?
That's right.
But it leads to the other question. Does angry music make us feel angrier, or the opposite? Is it cathartic?
No, I think it's rather like if we watch a movie or go to the theatre, where the actors are playing out these different emotions, and so it resonates with us because we've all gone through all sorts of human emotions as people, especially the older you get, and so it's the anger that might be suggested in music, or that conjures up the idea of anger for one person, maybe not another, but that kind of feeling. You resonate with it, but you're not actually feeling it yourself. You're observing it in effect, and so I think it's not so difficult to cope with.
And that's for an audience member. What about you when you play these very intense, furious sort of pieces? Do you feel like it's an outlet?
The great Austrian pianist Arthur Schnabel used to say, "Don't enjoy the music too much, because then the public won't enjoy it." And what I guess he was trying to say was, we have to keep our wits about us as performers. Mm-hmm. We are, in a sense, actors, and we have to bring this music, this drama to life for the listener. But it's not that we use our powers of memory and persuasion to bring this to life, but we're not actually feeling that emotion at that time. We know the emotion very well, so we're trying to recreate it. But we are recreative artists more than creative. But we have to be creative also to be recreative.
What about your sort of earlier musical life? You started off in Belfast, didn't you?
Yes. Yeah, I was very fortunate because the school I went to, you could play any musical instrument you wanted, and the lessons were there for you. And so I started with the piano, started studying with a local composer, Fred Houghton, and he was fantastic. It was great to get a start in music from the angle of a composer, because they think about things completely differently to instrumentalists. So that was wonderful. Then I fell in love with the clarinet, so I learned the clarinet and really had ambitions to be a professional clarinetist. That was even more than the piano. Then they wanted a cellist for the Baroque orchestra, so I learned the cello. I was never very good at the cello, but I loved carrying it around a bit. It made me look very important with my big cello. But one of my chief loves was the organ, and I used to play for assemblies, and I would play in the chapel, and I really loved all of Bach's organ music and Reger and Handel, and I had a great time. And so the piano really was just one of a few things, until my father had a chance meeting with an old friend when I was 16, and he said, your son should go and study with this woman. She's just come to visit her cousins and sister, and she was a pupil of Liszt. She had studied with one of Liszt's last pupils, Emil von Sauer. And so Felicitas Lewinter was a fantastic pianist and a great teacher, and she was visiting for the summer, so I had about 10 lessons with her, and that kind of clinched the deal for me to really concentrate on the piano. But of course, at the age of 16 is very, very late. Most of the virtuoso pianists today are playing transcendental studies at the age of 3. So I had a lot of catch up to do.
You grew up in Northern Ireland during the Troubles, and I mean, did it affect your connection to the music at all, with all this sort of agitation, anger, violence around?
I remember our French teacher in school, and she was English, and she would say to us that she had taught a lot in England. Now she was teaching in Belfast, and she said that she noticed that we were, in a sense, much more mature, or we had developed more quickly or further than our counterparts in England, because she said, you know, you're having to cope with this conflict all the time. And I know from my mother, every time I went out of the house, she was frantic, just waiting until I got back, because you know, you never know, you never knew whenever something was going to happen. So you just got on with life, but it was always there in the background. And so thank God we have peace now.
I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Well, the last person I talked to for this show actually taught violin post September 11 in Afghanistan. And he was talking about how immediate and how vital the arts became in somewhere that was, well, that had a lot of violence, that had a lot of this anger present. And what you were saying about your French teacher, do you think that the level of maturity that you just had to develop there sort of prepared you in a musical and artistic way to just get on the so-called virtuoso train for piano at that later stage, at 16 or 17 or whatever it was?
It's possible. Maybe it makes one a little bit more gritty and maybe more flexible to cope with challenges.
Yeah.
Could be. It's hard to say. I mean, everybody copes with difficulties and challenges in a different way, but certainly, I mean, it was around for a very long time. I was 9 when it started, and then of course it was only 1998 was the Good Friday Agreement. You know, it's quite a long time.
And then out of that came your Camerata Ireland, correct?
That's right. When they signed the Good Friday Agreement, and an amazing percentage of people north and south signed off on it and agreed and ratified it, I thought we artists, we should, you know, I was inspired very much by Václav Havel, that artists have a duty to not to try and change things, but applaud when something gets done that's right, and also uncover and make known if there are injustices. I think we can't fix things, but we can draw attention in a creative way. So I wanted to form an orchestra which was formed with members from Northern Ireland and from the Republic of Ireland. So it was going to be an all-Ireland orchestra, all-Ireland orchestra. We did the first concerts in 1999, so a year after the Good Friday Agreement. We did one in Belfast in the Stormont Parliament buildings one night, and then the next night in Dublin Castle. And it was just that. It wasn't meant to continue. It was just a kind of gala presentation. Well done, politicians, for getting this right. It's fantastic with peace. And then it just took off. We got great reviews from Washington Post, and we started touring in the US. And so here we are 21 years later, and still trying to go strong.
Apart from home in Ireland, you maintain this incredibly, well, before this incredibly busy globe-trotting schedule. So you're dealing with different hotels, jet lag, time zones, getting on these planes and lines at airports. And yet I found in Xi'an, in rehearsal, you were always this picture of calm, when it would be so easy to give into agitation or anger, or sometimes with all these things going on, the life of itinerant musician. How do you maintain that discipline and that calm?
My goodness. Well, I really enjoyed our concerts together.
Yeah, they were great.
Yeah. I think if you're passionate about the music and you're well prepared and you want to do a really good job, you have to be focused. And I don't let too many things bother me, because if I get too bothered on tour, I won't make it to the end of the tour. So I try to keep my cool as much as possible.
Restraint as sort of an antidote to anger, restraint in performance. I think I heard you in another interview talk about keeping the big picture in mind of where a climax in a Rachmaninoff concerto might be going. And I just wonder if you could speak to that big picture, that exercising restraint and discipline to be able to shape a big work like that.
It was the wonderful pianist Jorge Bolet, wonderful Cuban pianist, who was a fantastic Rachmaninoff player. He told me that there are a series of smaller peaks or moments of great intensity in Rachmaninoff, but there's always one which is the biggest one, and that produces the great cathartic feeling for the listener. And so I try to follow his example and structure it so that it's not totally frenzied all the time, that it has more lyrical moments, more still moments, more reflective moments. Mm-hmm. And then when the passion comes, or the intensity, just to try to build that gradually so that it really goes straight to the most important climax, which is usually at the end, with the big tune coming back before the coda, which is usually quite fast. And it's wonderful music, Rachmaninoff, absolutely fabulous.
It requires such discipline. And so this planning, is it a conscious thing? Do you sit and you say, okay, this is the climax here, and so we have to hold back until here, we can take a bit of time here, or is it more of an instinctive thing that takes place over the years of living with the piece?
I think it's more the second option there, Dane. It's playing it a lot and things become clear to you.
Yeah.
For instance, I'm going to do a live streamed concert in Dublin, the National Concert Hall, in the middle of June. And so I came back I'm going to play Mussorgsky Pictures at an exhibition to finish. And I've been playing it the last few days. And because I haven't played it for a while, and I haven't been traveling and doing concerts, I've discovered a whole bunch of new things in this piece, which I've played for many, many years. Hundreds of times I've played this piece. And it's just been fascinating things. And I say to myself, why didn't I find that before? It's so obvious.
There's
so that's the same, you have to live with the piece.
I mean, do you play differently to bring out different emotions in your work? And how would you do that?
What I noticed this week, that I'm pinpointing things which are really unusual about a particular movement, a particular picture in this series of pictures. And then when it's not so important, I'm moving quite quickly to the next one, and then I'm emphasizing it more. I didn't decide to do that, it just started to happen. And it's quite interesting, because then you start to really look at the innovative things that Mussorgsky wrote, the things that really make a difference to the character of the piece. And so I've taken myself by surprise.
That's fantastic. And your career, would you agree, it was really launched internationally when you won the Tchaikovsky Competition in 1986, I suppose, when tensions around the Cold War were very high. What were your experiences in Russia at that time, going and competing against a lot of Russian pianists? And were you the first Westerner to win since Van Cliburn?
I was the first Westerner since Van not to share it with Russia. Yeah. Because there have been others who have won it, but shared. It was an amazing time. I mean, Moscow, of course, and St. Petersburg, Russia has completely changed now. I remember my prize was 2,000 rubles, and you couldn't take that outside the country. So I would buy caviar and all sorts of things and get it out on the plane. So it took me 3 or 4 hours to spend that 2,000 rubles in the big department store in Red Square called GUM. So I spent the afternoon there and had to buy a couple of suitcases to put everything in. And then Gergiev, wonderful conductor, Valery Gergiev, he invited me. He became the artistic director of Tchaikovsky. And in 2011, he invited me to be on the jury. And just at the bottom of Tverskaya Street, just beside Red Square, they built a new Ritz-Carlton. So we were all in this Ritz-Carlton hotel. And the first night I arrived, I wanted to get a club sandwich and a glass of white wine. And it was 2,000 rubles. So times had changed, definitely.
That's inflation for you.
Yeah.
I don't know if off the top of your head, can you think of any maybe tense situations in rehearsal or in your travels, maybe not on your part, but that you had to diffuse somehow?
Only twice in my career have I object to somebody's behavior on the stage.
Mm-hmm.
Both times, I'm sorry to say, they were conductors that weren't particularly collegial, let's say.
Bloody conductors.
And one was in America, in a small city, and I just went to the management. I said, either he changes, he shall remain nameless, or I go. And so he was told, and he did change. It was one of those instances where he wasn't very well prepared, and he blamed everything on me, and I was totally prepared.
Oh, it's a classic maestro move sometimes, isn't it? Which there's no excuse for.
Yeah, but and the second one was a similar. It was an Italian conductor. The second one, so I just went to the manager and I said, "Look, you got to do something about this because I know this piece backwards. This conductor doesn't."
That's a message for all the conductors out there. Never blame anyone else for your own mistakes. And Barry, what about a piece of music that epitomizes anger to you?
Well, when I first moved to London, so we had very little opera in Ireland, especially in Northern Ireland. They had Dublin Grand Opera, which had a short season. So I'd hardly seen opera. Once I saw Rigoletto, and it was done in a cinema in Belfast, and there were 4 bomb scares. So that was the whole audience and the cast and orchestra came out 3 times, and then this was the 4th time. And the Duke of Mantua threw up his hands and said, "I'm off to the pub for a Guinness. I'm not doing this anymore." And so when I got to London, when I was 18, I just basically stayed put at the Opera House, Covent Garden and the English National Opera, and saw everything and bought the cheapest seats. But the first thing I saw was an amazing production, a ring cycle production of Wagner, with Colin Davis conducting. It was Götz Friedrich, the producer. And it was the most amazing production where the whole thing was based on this moving platform. And that would open up to show the Rhine maidens swimming below. It became Valhalla later on. And so that was the first time I heard the Ring. Live, I mean. And the second of the operas, Die Walküre, was the one that of course, it's got some of the best music, most lyrical music. Yeah, absolutely incredible. And so I fell in love with that. And I think the opening of that, where Siegmund is searching desperately and trying to calm himself down, is very stormy and does suggest a certain aggression and anger. But how it's done, the way Wagner has written it, is absolutely incredible. With how it starts with the lower strings, almost playing scales, just improvising. And then the horns come in and the whole thing works to a climax. Absolutely incredible music.
Oh, it is. It is. That's a great one to pick. Well, Barry, thank you very much for your time speaking about your career and about anger in music. I'm glad that you're not an angry person yourself, but thank you.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks, Dane. Good luck.